with your hands held high. Drop your guns, baby, and reach for the sky. Got you surrounded, you ain't got a chance. Send you back to Texas, make you work on your ranch, yeah.
It's hard to believe how unpopular LBJ was. He had what also was known as the credibility gap, which meant nobody believed the fucking thing he said. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Clarion Call, Reactions and Opinion. You know, I couldn't let the passing of Country Joe MacDonald go unremarked. He died last weekend. With the daylight savings time, which always knocks me for a loop, I'm just getting myself oriented. He is one of my earliest musical memories, at least of the psychedelic sound of the 60s. 1967 was the year that this album on the screen came out, Electric Music for the Mind and Body. It was one of a group of great albums that came out of the San Francisco area that year. I was 16 years old in the summer of 67, otherwise known as the Summer of Love in San Francisco. In my part of the world, on the East Coast, it was called the summer that no one can remember. It was the summer that we started smoking pot and started listening to music like this because a young lady from San Francisco came to our little summer community bearing these albums, including the first Grateful Dead album, Jimi Hendrix's first album, and Jefferson Airplane, Surrealistic Pillow. We got a heavy dose of San Francisco sound in the summer of 67. And this album in particular, I must have listened to hundreds of times. Country Joe, probably best known for his anti-Vietnam song, I-Feel-Like-I'm-Fixin to Die, which he performed at Woodstock and Monterey, and it was later used in a bunch of movies, and it was a very popular song among the soldiers in Vietnam who were fighting that war. But I'm going to highlight an equally political, perhaps, but somewhat less known song called Superbird. And I think it's interesting to look back almost 60 years as to how the anti-war movement was motivated by music like this and compare it with what's going on today, where you have a lot of paid protests, high finance involved. Back then it was much more organic. The song is about President Lyndon Johnson, who was at the helm when the big expansion of the Vietnam War happened around 1965. Now let's hear a little bit, and then we'll have a lot more to say about it.
Look up yonder in the sky now. What is that, I pray? It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a man insane. It's my president, LBJ.
Lyndon Baines Johnson, otherwise known as LBJ. Did you hear that guitar? The band itself is very tight. They've got a great bass player, drummer, and an organist, but the lead guitar is by a guy named Barry "theFish" Melton. And that's why the name of the band became Country Joe and theFish. Those two founded the group. Quite an excellent guitar player. Now, they were getting together mainly in Berkeley, California, which of course was a hotbed of political action in the early 60s, the free speech movement and the anti-war movement. But Joe was actually the son of a fellow who had moved from Oklahoma out to California, part of the whole Dust Bowl migration out of Oklahoma and places like that in the 30s. Joe was born in 1942. That's why they call him Country Joe, that even though he grew up in California, you know, his roots were in Oklahoma. He became a big fan of Woody Guthrie. And later on, after his rock and roll career, he went into more of a country sound. And he actually did a lot with albums of Woody Guthrie music, and he put together a Woody Guthrie show. He kind of idolized that popular spirit that Woody had of writing protest songs. He kept going with all kinds of topical songs throughout his whole career. I admit, I didn't really follow him that much after the original brand broke up in 1970, and then he went off on a solo career, and I didn't really follow all of that.
He's flying high, way up in the sky, just like Superman. But I have got a little piece of kryptonite. Yes, I'll bring him back to land. Said, come out, Lyndon, with your hands held high. Drop your guns, baby, and reach for the sky. I've got you surrounded and you ain't got a chance. Send you back to Texas, make you work on your ranch. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's hard to express how revolutionary music like this was. Other than folk music, which had a limited audience, there wasn't a great tradition of political music in rock and roll. This may have been one of the first groups really to come out very strongly against the Vietnam War, incorporate those feelings into music. And it had a huge impact on a whole generation of people who listened to this music. And it turned a lot of people against the Vietnam War, rightly or wrongly. In retrospect, you can debate, what happened in Vietnam and whether we should have left there like we did. But the public pressure to do that was so great. And it was really the counterculture music like this that forced the government's hand in the end as the war lost popularity at home.
They can call Superwoman and a super dog, but it sure won't do him no good. Yeah, I found out why from a Russian spy that he ain't nothing but a comic book. We'll pull him off the stands, clean up the land, yes, we'll have us a brand new day. What else more? I got the Fantastic Four and Doctor Strange to help on his way.
See, Lyndon ain't nothing but a comic book. He's the president of the United States, but he ain't nothing but a comic book. It's hard to believe how unpopular LBJ was. The main reason that a year after this, in 1968, he decided not to run for re-election. There was no way he could have won. The whole country had turned against him. He was referred to as Lying Lyndon. He had what also was known as the credibility gap, which meant nobody believed the fucking thing he said. He would get on television, and he just knew it was bullshit. Everything he said, you could just see he was a liar. His popularity was very high after Kennedy was assassinated and he became president. And he pushed through a lot of liberal legislation at that point, civil rights legislation, war on poverty, all that kind of thing. But once he got embroiled in Vietnam, his popularity sank like a stone. He had to get out. And I don't even know if he could have won his own party's nomination because Robert Kennedy Sr. would have run against him. I think would have beat him if he hadn't been killed, of course. Come out, Lyndon, with your hands held high. That's the chorus.
Come out, Lyndon, with your hands held high. Drop your guns, baby, and reach for the sky. Got you surrounded, you ain't got a chance. Send you back to Texas, make you work on your ranch. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna make a meat flour. Yeah, make it drop some acid.
And that's the whole thing. It's not a long song. I love that line at the very end, make him drop some acid. That's LSD. The idea of Lyndon Johnson on acid is just too mind-blowing to even consider. Lyndon was an alcoholic. He drank huge quantities of whiskey and was drunk most of the time. When he went on foreign tours, he would take cases and cases of his favorite whiskey with him. He was also a horrible womanizer. They talk about Kennedy. Kennedy had nothing on Johnson in that regard. I guess we've been doing a lot of these end of the era type videos because so many of the great people that made the music of my generation, the music of the 60s and the 70s great, are passing now in their 80s. Joe was 84. Today, everything has changed so much that, you do have artists like Springsteen, I guess, and others who try to make anti-Trump songs. He's like 70 years old, so I don't think he's reaching the same demographic that Country Joe was reaching in 1967. I don't know if there is somebody with that kind of influence. They're probably on TikTok, and I've probably never heard them before. They had a big impact on the world. Sorry to see them go. Now, Barry Melton is still alive, and he actually left music pretty much behind and became a lawyer and a criminal defendant, public defender, practiced law in Northern California for many years. And I guess he dabbled in some music, but mainly he took a career change. Just hearing this music again just brings me back almost 60 years to that summer of 67 and listening to this for the first time and what an impact it had on my life. Some people never left that left-wing point of view, and yet I went all the way to the other side in a long, strange trip. I should mention that Joe's parents were both actually members of the American Communist Party, and Joe was named after Joe Stalin. And the name Country Joe, I guess, also comes from Joe Stalin. because that's what he was called in some circles. The parents later renounced Joe after all his crimes were revealed. But obviously, Country Joe never really left that left-wing point of view. Joe was a pioneer. He will be remembered.